The most powerful people in entertainment don't just trade on fame, they trade on permission. Who gets praised, who gets punished, and who gets rewritten mid-story. Most stars learn the rules and keep quiet. A few don't, and that's where the machine shows its teeth. Dave Chappelle stepped away and told you what it felt like. Jim Carrey stopped smiling and held up a mirror. Oprah built an empire on narrative and became the lightning rod when those narratives cut against the grain. And when certain receipts began surfacing, the internet learned a hard truth. Sometimes the thing everyone denies is sitting on a device, waiting to go public. Tonight isn't about one scandal. It's about the ecosystem that creates them and the rare people who refuse the script. The headline most people remember is the easy one. Dave walked away and lost it. That's the story that moves fast because it feels neat and familiar. But the version Dave told in his own words didn't sound like a meltdown. It sounded like a boundary. He wasn't running from success. He was stepping away from the machine that started moving faster than his conscience could trust. When you become a product that prints money, everyone around you develops a sudden talent for telling you who you are and exactly what you need to do next. That's when labels appear. Not complicated, not exhausted, not overexposed. The word becomes unstable, the most convenient tool in the room. It's efficient. It explains away your no. It warns everyone else not to copy you. And it's sticky. Once it attaches, every future decision gets read through it. Dave tried to reframe it in real time. He spoke about pressure, second thoughts, and a system that pushes you to keep saying yes while the floor under you is changing shape. He talked about hearing the same stories for years, famous people crossing a threshold and suddenly becoming crazy at the exact moment their leverage peaks. That pattern isn't about psychology, it's about power. Think about how quickly a reputation can be engineered. You decline a scene. You question a contract. You ask for a pause. By the time you've found a quiet room, the narrative has already left the building. Meanwhile, the audience only gets the ending. He ran. That's why Dave leaving shook people. He didn't disappear. He explained. And in explaining, he handed viewers a decoder ring for the industry's favorite trick. If you can't control a person, control their story. Narrative control is subtle when it's working. You raise a concern and the conversation tilts skillfully from what you're saying to why you might not be thinking clearly. The tone softens. The eyebrows lift. Suddenly, we're not discussing the contract, the pressure, or the pace. We're discussing you. And the audience learns the wrong lesson, that discomfort equals instability. This is why interviews matter so much. The person with the platform isn't just hosting. They're setting the emotional weather. If the host frames your concerns as stress or burnout, your words get filed under personal instead of structural. If the host treats your perspective as coherent, even if they disagree, audiences at least consider that maybe the system, not the person, is the problem. Years later, when high-profile specials dive into decades-old allegations, you see the same mechanics in reverse. A choice is made about emphasis, tone, and pattern. The goal might be illumination. The effect is still framing. Viewers take that frame and run with it. Those who already believe feel vindicated. Those who doubt feel attacked. And the person in the center, alive or not, becomes a referendum on whether you believe the frame. This is how power persists without ever raising its voice. It doesn't have to silence you if it can just subtitle you. It doesn't need to rebut your claims if it can redefine them as symptoms. The lesson for viewers is simple and uncomfortable. Whenever a narrative arrives pre-labeled, unstable, eccentric, difficult, ask who benefits from the label sticking. Show business has an unprinted rule. Don't get mad at betrayal. Call it business, keep smiling. Shake the hand that just slipped the knife between your shoulder blades and ask what time tomorrow's call is. The culture rewards people who can swallow the insult, post the photo, and pretend it never happened. Break that rule, raise your voice, show you're hurt, and you become the story. Over time, that conditioning turns silence into a survival skill. It's why people build islands of sanity, away from press runs, away from the commentariat, away from strategists who can explain why a tiny compromise isn't really a compromise. The island doesn't mean you're hiding. It means you're trying to hear your own thoughts without an audience voting live. Inside the machine, professional just means frictionless. It means you agree to be repackaged even when the package crushes your ribs. Difficult means you can't be reshaped on schedule. The fastest way to get labeled difficult is to say the most human word in a room full of money. No. And here's the twist. Even the people doing the repackaging often believe they're helping. The system runs on deadlines, release dates, and quarterly goals. There's always a project that can't slip, a campaign that can't stall, a number that has to be hit. Your interior life doesn't fit the spreadsheet, so the spreadsheet wins. There are two Jim Carreys in the public memory. The first is the Joker, the guy who went on late night and turned secret symbols into a cartoon, playing it so straight it made people laugh and get uneasy. Call it satire. Call it a bit. But it poked a bruise that never healed. The sense that fame isn't just attention, it's initiation. Then there's the second Carrey, the one who, after the 2022 Oscars slap, dropped the mask and spoke plain. He didn't hedge. He didn't soften. He called the room spineless en masse. In one sentence, he revealed the part of the machine everyone understands but rarely says. The room protects its own as long as the optics can be massaged. When a line gets crossed, the first instinct isn't moral clarity, it's damage control. The reason that moment landed is because it wasn't performative. It wasn't an award season speech about bravery that somehow thanked 7 publicists. It was a mirror. You didn't need a film degree to understand it. You just had to watch a room full of people choose applause instead of a boundary. Carrey's point wasn't that the industry is uniquely corrupt. It was that the industry is uniquely visible and chose visibility over accountability. Satire exposes what earnestness can't. Earnestness exposes what satire avoids. Carrey used both. And together they drew a circle around the quiet truth Dave tried to explain, that the entertainment business doesn't have to censor you if it can convince you that the cost of honesty is exile. Rumors are cheap. Files are expensive. The modern internet runs on the difference. A story can live for years, as she said, and then one day a clip drops and the oxygen leaves the room. What used to be a debate becomes a replay button. People don't ask, "Do you believe?" They ask, "Did you see?" That shift from whispers to receipts changed how viewers think about power. Suddenly, a timeline that felt abstract becomes painfully linear. Allegations, denials, litigation, and then a video that freezes the conversation. In the old era, PR could smother a rumor with volume. In the receipts era, a single frame can smother a decade of PR. This is why the machine fears documentation more than outrage. Outrage dissipates. Documentation circulates. Outrage needs momentum. Documentation needs bandwidth. And the internet has unlimited bandwidth. There's a hard lesson in this for everyone, not just the powerful. A clip can be incomplete or lack context and still end a career. A file can be weaponized. The public can turn judge and jury before anyone sees a courtroom. But there's an even harder lesson for people who banked on spin. When evidence exists, spin looks like panic. The larger pattern matters more than any single case. The center of gravity moved. It doesn't live in a press office anymore. It lives in the cloud. And every decision, from how a star handles a crisis to how a gatekeeper frames a story, happens under the threat that somewhere, someone saved the raw footage. Narrative control cuts both ways. Shape a story and you also inherit the storm around it. Audiences now carry long memories and quick receipts. They remember who platformed what, who looked away, and who suddenly found their voice once a tide had already turned. This is why high-profile figures who curate pain into programming get judged not just by what they air, but when they air it and how they talk about it. If you cast a situation as a pattern, you're stepping into the role of arbiter. That invites gratitude from some and fury from others. It also invites scrutiny into your past decisions, your relationships, your blind spots. That's not hypocrisy. That's gravity. Power draws heat. The uncomfortable truth is that you can be sincere and still be perceived as strategic. You can mean well and still be accused of timing. In a receipts culture, your explanation competes with everyone else's archive. And once the audience decides you're managing them, every future move tastes like spin, even when it isn't. So the people who used to control narrative from the top now find themselves living in the same economy as everyone else, the economy of proof. The audience doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for consistency. And when consistency cracks, they reach for the folder where they saved your quotes. Now we need to talk about the gravity well that still bends this conversation. Michael Jackson. What follows is not presented as proven fact. It's the long-running theory many fans, observers, and some insiders have floated for years. Rumors suggest Jackson didn't just guard his privacy. He documented his world. Not as a hobby, but as protection. Reports claim he kept tapes, logs, and personal notes because he understood the oldest rule in show business. The machine respects leverage. It's been said that Neverland functioned as both sanctuary and archive, a place where the noise couldn't reach but the details could be saved. Whether that vault exists in the way people imagine is unknowable from the outside. What's undeniable is why the theory persists. Michael had scale. He had access. He had a front row seat to how reputations get made, unmade, and remade for convenience. He watched labels migrate from genius to eccentric to unstable, depending on who needed him compliant. And he watched how a single interview's framing could tilt the entire world's opinion for a decade. If you're a machine that runs on control, the most dangerous person isn't the rebel who leaves. It's the legend who stays, refuses your social contract, and quietly collects. If the legend has global influence and a fan base that treats him like family, you're not just managing a star, you're negotiating with a nation. That's why the idea of a Jackson archive rattles people, even years later. Not because of what's in it, no one outside the inner circle can say, but because of what it represents. The possibility that a person who lived through the industry's most merciless framing kept the receipts in a place you can't subpoena, memory, loyalty, and 1,000 private hard drives spread across continents. So where does that leave us? With a set of rules that finally make sense. If you're a viewer, it means learning to separate framing from fact, emotion from evidence, and timing from truth. If you're a creator, it means understanding that every no will be tested for weakness, and every yes will be tested for sincerity. If you're a gatekeeper, it means discovering that the audience you once managed can now fact-check you in real time. Chappelle showed what it costs to refuse repackaging. Carrey showed what it looks like when a room chooses comfort over clarity, and how one sentence can puncture the room's spell. High-profile arbiters of narrative learned that choosing a frame makes you the story. And everyone learned that the only thing more powerful than a rumor is a file with a date stamp. The machine didn't vanish. It evolved. It learned to look friendly. It learned to say, "We hear you," but it still answers to the same God it always has: control. The difference is that now control isn't centralized. It's cached. In an industry built on edits, the people who resist are easy to isolate until the raw footage rolls. Maybe that's the legacy of this era. Fewer whispers, more archives. Fewer labels, more links. The machine will keep curating, reframing, forgiving some and burying others. But the audience learned to ask a better question. Not, who said it? What's on the tape? And somewhere between a comic's boundary, a star's mirror, a mogul's storm, and a handful of files that wouldn't stay hidden, the balance shifted. Just enough to remind everyone that the most dangerous power in show business isn't fame, it's proof.